everybody. So we are so excited to be here. We are here to talk about the latest Disney live-action remake, live-action film based on their previous properties, Christopher Robin. And I'm Rachel, and my friend Conrado is here to talk about all things Disney.
He certainly is, and he's very excited to be here.
Yes, thank you very much. And if you want to hear more of our thoughts about Disney, we did an Over-Under podcast that was really fun, where we talked about movies that we think are underrated in Disney canon and ones we think are overrated. And one of the ones we talked for quite a bit on was actually the original Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So I'll put a link down to that if you want to check that out. That was a fun one.
Yeah, it was fun. I think it was the first podcast that we ever recorded together, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so look where we are now.
That's right.
Come a long way.
Yes. So before we dive into this latest movie, I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about these remakes as a whole and how we feel about them, and then dive into this specific one. So what is your overall feeling about this sort of remake trend that Disney has been doing?
Mm-hmm. So I guess when we talk about the remakes, I guess I would like to start by sort of defining what we're talking about, because I feel like Disney has been doing remakes for a while now. There's definitely the 101 Dalmatians back in the 90s, and, The Parent Trap was also in the 90s. But I think we're really talking about the very recent trend of taking mostly their animated sort of canon classics and remaking them. And I think the trend that I see in these more recent remakes is that they try to sort of like very consciously update them to like our times. Like they try to bring in something new to them that wasn't there in the originals, that speaks to like our new sensibilities. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking, I feel like this whole trend started with Alice in Wonderland, with that being such a massive hit, and that kind of got this whole sort of ball rolling as far as taking the animated films and trying to make live action versions of them. And for the most part, I have not liked these movies. There are some that are fine, but others that I really don't like. And the thing, I kind of feel like, I call them the cheap quills in the late 90s, 2000s.
The direct-to-video sequels.
Yeah, the direct-to-video sequels. And I kind of feel like these are the new cheap quills, in the sense that, like, some of those are fine. Like, the Aladdin sequels are fine. The Lion King,
I think that's being generous a little bit, but sure.
They're fine. Like, the Lion King sequels are fine.
The Lion King 1.5, that's the Timon and Pumbaa one, right?
Yeah.
I remember liking that when I was a kid.
Yeah. This, I think the Lilo and Stitch ones are pretty decent. I like Cinderella 3. Some of them are fine. But I kind of like the first. I kind of like the Little Mermaid prequel, not the sequel. But obviously none of them are even close to the originals. And the only reason they exist is to make money.
That's a great point about these new movies, because although, I think these new movies, definitely the main reason they exist is to make money. And, with Disney, most of the things that exist from them have money as one of the top priorities, obviously. But I do think they are trying to bring in something new to the sequels a lot of the time. And I think it's interesting that most of the time it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't really bring anything. I mean, it brings new stuff that wasn't there before, but I don't think any of that stuff is necessarily valuable.
Mm-hmm. But it is frustrating on a couple levels for me, because first of all, it's not the way Disney always was. Walt Disney is famous for saying, around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we are curious. and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. We keep moving forward. And so that was his philosophy, and that's why Disney never made a sequel in his life as far as animated. He never made a sequel, and he had plenty of opportunities too, and people who wanted him to make sequels.
Yeah, well, I think it's also, we should also keep in mind that back then sequels weren't necessarily profitable the way they are now. You know, the market right now has sort of evolved into a market in which sequels make usually more money than the originals, whereas back then it was the opposite. Although at the same time, one can make the argument that Disney helped to create this sequel market. So, you know, it's a complicated issue, I think. But we're definitely at a point where remakes and sequels are seen as the most profitable thing to do. And, you know, one of the biggest companies in the world, it makes sense that they would want to try to get some of that market.
But it can't be denied that they're extremely successful. So, you know, they're a business, and so they have a right to make money. So but you know, I do feel like it's sort of going against Walt's greater vision, and which is frustrating. And also it's frustrating because when Lasseter and crew took over Walt Disney Animation Studios, when he became the president, their first movie that came out after that was Meet the Robinsons. And and he talked about, if you read Creativity Incorporated, they talk about just how dispirited and how sad everybody was when they went in to the studio after having done Chicken Little, and just how there was just no creativity, and everything just seemed everybody was really nervous about like suggesting ideas and all that stuff. And I just think it was really interesting that at the end of Meet the Robinsons, which is a film that has problems, but I think it does have a core message of hope, which I like. But at the end, they have this moving forward quote at the end of Meet the Robinsons from Disney. And so I feel like, and right when Lasseter took over, they stopped the sequels because they were going to make a Dumbo 2. They were going to, and he was like, nope, no more. And so I feel like it's disappointing that they kind of lost that initial sort of promise. I feel like, and
yeah.
Anyway.
I guess what I'm trying to say is this is definitely frustrating, especially for people like you and I that like have a lot of feelings and connections to the old Disney classics.
Yeah.
But it strikes me as not necessarily a Disney problem. This seems like it's a sort of media, Hollywood at large cultural problem, because I think I see a lot of going back, remaking, sequels, going back to things that, you know, already exist all over the place, not just at Disney, but like, you know, in TV and even in books, in music, like, you know, it's all over the place. So I think it's definitely something that is much bigger than just this company. That being said, these remakes, I don't like them.
Okay, yeah. And I also hate the way that they're marketed. There's just so, and part of it is my fault for being a Disney blogger, so that I get so much of it more than the average person. But to have like things like the Beauty and the Beast remake, to have plastered right on the trailer, even better than the original, you know, it's just like, like I wish that they could do what like Mad Max Fury Road did, where they just sold the movie. They didn't have to say, oh, we're modernizing it, we're updating it, we're making it better. You know, it just kind of makes me sad, and it frustrates me. But so I hate the way these movies are marketed.
Well, yeah, I think we can have a whole other podcast. We can have like a whole, you know, series of podcasts just on the history of Disney marketing, because that's like a big,
But let's talk real quick about each of these. We can just say like yay or nay what we thought about them. So we have Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. They got this ball rolling.
Big nay for me. It's one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life, in my opinion. I really, really hate that movie.
Yeah. It's just so, I agree. Nay for me. It loses all the nonsense. It makes it boring with this prophecy. I hate the Hatter in it. It was very annoying. You get way too much of the Red Queen. She's shrill. And in the animated film, they use just enough of her. And it's just not fun. There's no nonsense to it. And so, yeah, don't like it.
I am not a huge fan of the original Alice in Wonderland. That's something that we talked about in the first podcast that we ever recorded, like you mentioned. So I could potentially be sold on, a reimagining of Alice in Wonderland. It's a little different from the original, but whatever they did here, is just so lame and insipid. And honestly, I think it looks very, very ugly. I think it's one of the ugliest looking movies I've ever seen. I can't believe that it won 2 Oscars for production design and costume design, because I just think the whole aesthetic of the thing is, like a parody of Tim Burton stuff, and with none of the like actually engaging visuals of some of his best movies. I really, really don't like that movie.
Yeah, I actually do think the costumes are pretty good, but Colleen Atwood is, the best. But I agree with you on the aesthetic. It's just unpleasant. So, all right, then we have Maleficent, which is a movie that I hate with 1,000 Fiery Suns. I get it that they tried to do something different, but it just really pissed me off. I hate what they did with the fairies, making them just so phenomenally stupid. I hate the idea that, they're practically letting Aurora walk off of a cliff. That's their only job. They have 3 people and they can't take care of her. Like, I know they were a little silly in the animated film, but they were actually like pretty smart too. Like they're able to get Philip the Sword of Truth. They're able to. They're the ones that suggest the idea to Stefan and they're able to hide Aurora from Maleficent for 16 years successfully. Here she finds out about it in like the first day, and the fact her whole motivation is so ridiculous. I hate the ending with her being True Love's kiss is so ridiculous. I hate it. I hate King Stefan in it. He's awful actor, awful performance. I hate the character. I am like, why do you take one of the best villains in Disney history and replace it with some weak, awful villain? You basically have Maleficent getting raped at the beginning. With him taking her wings and leaving her. So you take this character that's like a strong, villain, and turn her into this like victim. Like it made me so mad.
Well, yeah. I don't remember a lot of that movie, but I do think I appreciate that they try to do something different a little more than you are. I think, to me, the most interesting aspect of the movie is what you mentioned with the sort of rape allegory and what that could say about a character. I think that's like a interesting thing in concept. I don't think they did anything particularly interesting with it in the movie. I also, I have very little feelings about it, other than I don't really like it as a movie. But I don't hate it the way you do.
It was my first rant on my channel. I listen. But Sleeping Beauty was very special to me as a little girl. Before Little Mermaid, it was my princess movie. So I don't know.
There you go.
But and I have lots of other little nitpicky things that drove me crazy, like the way they handled the way they handled the crow, and the way that they handled the blessing scene really irritated me. Anyway, but Angelina Jolie is pretty good. That's the only thing I really liked about it. And I guess her costume is pretty good. So Cinderella is my favorite of all of these remakes. I think that, I love Cinderella as a story in general. I just think it's a very hopeful story. But I really like the fact that I like the message of kindness and courage in it. I think it's a really good message. I really like that they expanded on Lady Tremaine's character just a little bit, just enough to give her some backstory without like completely changing her. And I just like the fact that it was like, we've had so many warrior women stories. I like the fact that this was like a softer, more feminine version of strength. And I I like that you get to know the prince just like a little bit, and and I like the way they involved the animated film, like a little bit, like had her humming some of the songs and different things without it. Like there was just sort of an homage.
Right.
So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie.
I think Cinderella is fine from what I remember. I agree with you. I really like the thing I remember the most and that I like the most is what they do with the prince, and that they make him a very sensitive and character. I remember the scene in which he crawls into bed with his dad, with the king when he's sick, and I thought that was a very tender moment and very emotional. I wasn't expecting them to do something like that with the male character because it's so rare that we see that sort of tenderness. So I really like that. I think one of the big problems I have with the movie is that this is back when Disney, I think, was a little afraid of making these remakes into musicals, and I think this would have benefited a lot from being an outright musical. It would have been, I would have enjoyed it much more. I think the little singing that there is,
or just like an homage.
it's a little I would have liked it. I think I would have enjoyed it more as a musical. I thought the movie was like a little dull at times. I think the music would have given you like the extra energy that I wanted from it.
I can see that. All right, then we had Jungle Book. This was Jon Favreau, and I think this one is pretty good. I like it. Certainly looks impressive. I like they changed Mowgli into more like proactive character. He's not quite as whiny, not quite as annoying. But I don't think a lot of the in this case, I don't think a lot of the ties to the original Disney film really work. I don't like the way that they made Louis so mean. He's supposed to be slick and cool, and because we already have a mean villain in Shere Khan, we don't need another just outright bully mafia kind of character, which is how they played him. I didn't think that the singing worked in this really at all. I don't know, fell out of place to me. And but other than that, I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine as well. The visual effects are really good. There's some good moments. Going back through them, I realized I don't really remember a lot of them a lot, and I think that's
very
maybe
forgettable.
Yeah, that's I think one of their biggest weaknesses is that they're, because they rarely go for something truly, they bring in these little changes, but never something like memorable and dramatic, that you would say like.
Well, that's why I think Maleficent 2 is going to be not going to do well, because these movies, sure, they make a lot of money at the beginning, but I don't hear anybody talking about like, oh, Maleficent, one of my favorite movies. They got to make a
sequel. What about Alice Through the Looking Glass?
Yeah.
That didn't make any money.
That was the next one, and it was not great. I mean, it was a little bit nicer to look at, I think, than the original. But it was, you're supposed to buy that Alice would risk like the whole fate of everybody going back in time and making all these changes and stuff because of her deep love for the Hatter, which I never felt in the original film. I didn't feel like they were that great of friends, and so it's not a good movie. I
never saw it. I haven't seen it, and it sounds atrocious though.
Yeah, it was really bad. Okay, and then we had Pete's Dragon. This was by David Lowery. This is a really good movie. I really liked it. It's really a remake in name only. It's totally different than the original.
Yeah, I mean, now we're talking. This is far and away, like with no contest, my favorite of the remakes. The only one that I would say is like a truly good movie, in my opinion. And I think it's so good. It strikes such a nice tone, and it's emotional where it needs to be. It has like a sense of awe and a sense of discovery, and the dragon is so well animated and has such nice personality. I think it benefits from being adapted from a movie that is known by a certain demographic, people of a certain age, and Disney fanatics, but not really beloved to the degree and ubiquitous the way that some of the big, more popular remakes are, and then they could change a lot of it for the better, and they didn't feel beholden to the original, and I think they benefited a lot from that. It makes it the best of these movies.
Yeah, I really agree. It was a beautiful movie, and they really took the sort of the boy and his dog, but it was a boy and his dragon, and it was really good. So okay,
Yeah.
well let's start talking about Christopher Robin. So now this is the
Wait a second, we haven't talked about one more remake. The last year's Beauty and the Beast, the
oh
biggest of them all, and also the best one of them all, right, Rachel?
How did I forget to put that on my list? That's funny. Yes, so Beauty and the Beast. So this movie, I am not a big fan of. I feel like, so originally I gave it like a C because I think that if you're not like a hardcore, like it has some fun, big musical sequences, but I did a 50-minute video of, I called it my nitpicking of Beauty and the Beast because there were so many things they did that irritated me. I don't understand the changes they made to Gaston's character. That made no sense to me. I thought the whole LeFou being gay thing was so insulting, honestly. Like, not that he's gay, but the way they handled it was worst. I think that I thought that the whole idea that Maurice would keep the fact that his wife died of the plague as some kind of shameful thing made no sense. The book was terrible. I hated the fact that they somehow made the household objects culpable for what happened, for the curse. It's like, they're like, well, we watched him raise him like this and we didn't say anything. It's like, you were servants. He was the king. What are you supposed to say? Like, are you kidding me? And that made me really mad. I hated how they handled the ending when like Belle's kiss doesn't actually make him transform. It has to. So they're just like sitting there, and they're turning into permanent objects, and then the sorceress or whatever, who's the worst person in the world, comes in, and then she decides to change things back. I was like, what? That made me really mad. And I hated Emma Watson singing so much. She can't sing. And I didn't like Emma Thompson's version of Beauty and the Beast. And I don't know. I was just didn't like it.
Okay, but tell me how you really feel. I think this is clearly the biggest example of being beholden to the original but wanting to change little details. I feel like my review of this movie is just, why? There's no reason. Every little thing that they changed, the original is so good,
right,
that there was no point in changing anything, and everything that they changed was a bad choice, didn't go anywhere, made the movie worse than it was at the beginning. So the best case scenario was that they made a like shot for shot remake of the animated film, and if they had done that, then why would they have done that in the first place? So I think it's the biggest example of what makes these remakes so unfulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, they could have done what the Broadway musical did and just expand a little bit, like what I was saying about Cinderella, like expand a little bit the way it expand a little bit on Lady Tremaine's character without like fundamentally altering who she is, and which I like that. But yeah, I mean, the whole leading up to it made me a crazy person with the way they were marketing it, and so but I feel like, I mean, everybody was like, oh, this is the greatest movie ever. And then now nobody is talking about it. Like, I don't hear anybody like saying, oh, that was such a magical, like my nieces aren't talking about it like they were about Frozen or Moana. They're talking about Moana way more than they're talking about Beauty and the Beast.
I'm glad to hear that. It gives me hope for the future.
Yeah, right. Anyway, well, let's move on from that experience. And yeah, we have 3 next year. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. But but let's talk about Christopher Robin. So
right.
we were blessed to only have 1 remake this year. I mean, there's a sequel in Mary Poppins, but I feel hopeful about that.
We'll talk about that when the time comes, I guess.
Right. But anyway, so let's talk about Christopher Robin. So this directed by Mark Forster, and were you kind of excited going into it? I was excited because I thought it looked cute, and I thought, oh, maybe they're doing something different, kind of like Pete's Dragon.
There were a couple of reasons I was excited for it. The first one was that when they first announced it, they announced Alex Ross Perry as the screenwriter. And he is a very unusual choice because he usually makes these sort of very small budget and very mature and adult, indie dramas. He's a filmmaker based in New York City. And he's made a lot of psycho thrillers and, very movies about unlikable people, I guess. So I was curious to see how it would take on such a nice and beloved character as Winnie the Pooh. So that got me interested in the first place, because I usually not interested at all about these remakes. And the other thing that got me interested was when the trailer came out, and I think a lot of people thought the same thing, that Pooh looked really cute.
Yeah.
And very adorable. And so that made me think that this might be like a delightful movie. Probably Paddington played into it as well.
Yeah.
Give me a bit of a feel of like, oh, a nice British bear. I think this is going to be fun and cute in the same way.
Yeah, that's basically too, because I love, it's still my favorite. Paddington 2 is still my favorite movie of the year. I love that movie. So, all right. Well, now that you've seen it, what was your overall thoughts about it? Your overall response?
My overall response is that it's fine. There are things about it that I like. There are things about it that I don't like. I think as a whole, the things that I like are more than the things that I don't like. So if we're talking about pass fail, I would probably give it like a soft pass.
Okay.
And I don't know, we can go more in depth about it. My sense is that most people are not too thrilled about it. And it's been perceived as somewhat of a disappointment. I have very specific feelings about why that is and theories, so we can get into that later.
Very good. Yeah, I was disappointed. There are some good things about it, but overall I didn't really like it. So we'll talk about it. So first thing I thought we'd ask is, what did you think of the overall aesthetic of the film, the character designs, and also just the lighting, the aesthetic? It was very unusual.
Yeah. This is interesting because I think just based on what I've seen you, like tweet or talk about on your blog or so far about the movie, I get the sense that you have some issues with the story and the screenplay of the whole thing. I actually think that the screenplay is perfectly fine. I think that it's not the best thing I've ever, heard in my entire life, but it's a screenplay that works, that hits the, right beats or whatever. It could have made for a pretty good movie. I think the biggest problem with the movie is in the direction and in Mark Forster's decisions. So if we're going to talk about sort of the design and that sort of thing, I think the design of the characters, for the most part, works for me, but the way in which the movie is shot, which I think is something that you are trying to get into, doesn't take, it doesn't, I don't know how to say this. I feel like it doesn't support the material. I feel like there is material in the screenplay, and then the direction doesn't seem to connect with what the screenplay is trying to do. Especially in the comedy, I think that there's a lot of moments of sort of physical comedy or like little bits that they just don't play because of the way that the director decided to shoot the scene. Just off the top of my head, I can think of an early scene in The Office when the boss comes around and he sort of like leans on the pile of suitcases and they all fall to the ground. And I think that's supposed to be funny or a little bit of comedy, but it's shot so close to his face and it's cut so quickly in the editing that it doesn't even register as a joke. And I think a lot of the things that happen later in the movie, a lot of the, I guess, action sequences, like when they're like running through the streets and all those sort of things, they're shot in a way that you can't really tell what's going on. You can really get the jokes. Everything seems a little off. I think he was not very considerate about what the choices he was making.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I do like the aesthetic as far as though I feel like the lighting, the like the character design and stuff. Some people have said it feels like a Terrence Malick film for Disney as far as the lighting, and I guess that would be more Emmanuel Lubezki actually.
Sure.
But
I mean, there is that moment in which Pooh like caresses the fields of wheat as he's like walking towards Christopher Robin, which is such a Terrence Malick thing to do, and it's just very, I don't know what the point of that was, but
I mean, and I'm a Terrence Malick apologist, and so I like that aesthetic, and so that was a plus to me in the movie. I liked the character designs. I thought they felt cuddly and cute and kind of old, and I liked that. I liked the character designs. I liked the design aesthetic. I thought it looked nice. So
I think the lighting and the character design, I would agree with you, are actually pretty good looking, especially when compared to some of the other remakes that we've talked about that look really hideous. But I think it's more so in the choices of directing in terms of where to put the camera and the editing and the shots and that sort of thing that really doesn't do it for me.
I can see what you mean. So one thing that annoyed me, and this gets to sort of my main problem with the movie, is that in the original film, I love the ending when Christopher knows that he is having to move on from childhood, and he says to Pooh, "Promise you'll never forget me?" And Pooh says, "I promise." And well, live to be 100 anyway. They go back and this is, and Pooh says, "Well, how long will I live?" And she's 99, and then silly old bear, and you get this whole scene, and it's so good. And
wait, so let me just, sorry to interrupt, but you're talking about the beginning of this movie, right?
So, but there's a change. So in the original film, it's Christopher saying to Pooh, "Promise you'll always remember me." What they do here is Pooh says to Christopher that, "Promise you'll always remember me." And so in this case, you have Pooh like asking for the promise and Christopher forgetting him. And that really irritated me because that means basically, and like these are in this movie, these are like sentient beings who other people besides Christopher can see. And so Christopher has forgotten Winnie, he's broken his promise, and I don't know, that kind of bothered me.
I can see that. At the same time though, if he had remembered his promise, like there would be no movie. So I feel like the whole premise, because it's basically the plot of adult person has to reconnect with his childhood self. So it's basically like a remake of Hook, if you really think about it. And the whole premise is that he would have forgotten who he was back then, and then Pooh comes back to bring him back. But I mean, you might have a point that they could have done it in a better way.
Yeah. Well,
not put it at all,
what they
right?
should have done is had his daughter, Madeline, stumble upon the 100-acre woods, and there are Pooh and Piglet and everybody living happily there in the 100-acre woods, and she meets them, and then Christopher ends up meeting them and because of his daughter, and it was like, "Oh yeah, I remember." But in this case, it's like Pooh and Piglet are like in this weird limbo waiting for Christopher to come back, and he's forgotten them. It's like, what? I don't know. It really annoyed me. I didn't like it. Yeah. So anyway, and then because these are like other people are holding them, other people are seeing them, other people are hearing them. That was a weird choice, I thought. And also, like, I thought it was really weird the way that when Christopher sees Pooh again, like his response was not a typical, like when people see a magical creature in most movies, they're like, "Oh my gosh, whoa, what is this?" And he's like, not even that, like, he's like, "Pooh, what are you doing here?" Like, what?
I actually kind of like that because I feel like we've seen that reaction to the magical creature so many times, and it just like waste of time at this point. We know that he's going to recognize and go along with Pooh. So I actually liked that, that we didn't spend too much time with him being, what is this crazy talking bear or whatever. I don't think that was necessary, but
it just made him feel like he was cold to me.
That's a different point. I could see that.
Yeah. That, he'd made this promise to Pooh long ago, and then he sees him again, and you think he would at least be like, oh my gosh, this great thing from my childhood. Like, I don't know. It just it made him seem emotionally cold to me. But I can see what you're saying. It's true. But another weird thing. So we've had many movies about the workaholic dad, that usually it's a dad that comes to understand that he has to love his family and balance things out and everything like that. And that can be a good message, but it's usually it's pretty handled pretty badly. I know there's lots of Hallmark movies that have this message, because typically in Hallmark, business is the villain. It's the bad business.
It kind of is in this movie too.
Yeah. And so I can be fine with that. But what was really strange here is that we're supposed to vilify Christopher for his love of business, but the only reason that he is missing this weekend with his family is because if he doesn't work, literally the entire team is going to be fired. Like,
yeah,
this is so weird. Like, he's doing a really good thing. Like, what is the Haley Atwood character? What does his wife want him to do? Like, let all these people get fired?
Point. You make a good point, and I think it might be a little. I don't know. This may or may not be in contradiction to your original problem with the movie, but I feel like it could have worked if they made Christopher into more of a unlikable person, right? Like someone who has forgotten Pooh and his life in the 100-acre, right? Like something like that, in which he has totally forgotten his family, and he doesn't even realize that his daughter and his wife are missing him and want to spend time with him. Because he is a pretty decent guy, and he feels bad about the fact that he can't go to the country with his wife and kid or whatever. So I can totally see that.
Well, I mean, that's why you want to have Madeline be the one to find the 100-acre woods and be the one to help her father get out of his grumpiness. Like, that makes way more sense to me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could see that working.
So yeah, it's so weird. Like, he's not even a bad dad. Like, I had to actually, this is going to sound really funny, but I had the same problem with 9 Lives. Like, 9 Lives has lots more problems than this movie. But like, they kept trying to sell that the dad getting turned into a cat was deserved. And it was like, no, it's not. He literally spends the first 15 minutes of the movie getting a birthday present for his daughter. Like, he's not a bad dad. And it's like, this is super mean that he's getting turned into a cat. And he hasn't done anything like that's that bad. And I feel kind of the same way here. I'm like, maybe I'm just cold and dead to business or something, because he's not like a bad dad. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
I think, maybe there's I feel like I hear this a lot, but this might be anecdotal, but a lot of people, I feel like, really are afraid of their main characters not being likable or, not feeling relatable and that sort of thing. And I think that might be what's going on here, especially for children's entertainment. But we've had unlikable characters in the past, and they have worked really well, like you mentioned Scrooge or like the Grinch or characters like that. Like, because everyone is like angry or upset or selfish at times, so we can definitely relate with that sort of thing, and maybe we can be a little more daring in our children's entertainment is how I feel about it.
I agree with you. My favorite scene in the movie was the scene at the train station when he loses Pooh and with the whole thing with the balloon and everything. I thought that was...
The balloon was so good. I thought the balloon was so funny and also so sweet, how he just goes, I really would like a balloon. It made me very happy.
Yeah, that was very sweet, and I liked that whole sequence was my favorite part.
I think that sequence really justified for me the decision to make the toy characters be seen and heard by other humans, because we got a lot of, funny moments out of that, especially in that scene. um at the same time, that scene made me a little frustrated because I was thinking of how this scene would have played out if it was directed by a different person. Like if it was directed by, for example, Paul King, who directed Paddington and
Yeah.
Paddington 2. And I think of the scene in Paddington 2 in which he tries to be a barber, and how that scene is so
Mhm.
well tailored to the comedy of the scene, and how you can
Yeah.
see exactly the idea of Paddington being or not being in the frame is funny in that scene.
Yeah.
And something like
It's
that
true.
would have been really great. You could have gotten so much out of it with these very cute, very funny characters that, on top of everything else, have these personalities that we already come to love.
Yeah.
So you could have, I think, yeah, it was a little disappointing that you couldn't go even further with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that. I agree with you. Yeah, and then he gets to the 100 Acre Wood, and you have this whole scene with Pooh getting scared about the woozles, and he Christopher is pretty mean to Pooh, I feel like, in this scene, and
Mm-hmm.
Pooh leaves, and
Mm-hmm.
and uh and then he has to convince the rest of the 100 Acre crew that he's not a woozle. And I don't know, do you think Christopher is a little too mean?
I mean, that's
Is
a
he a
hard question
woozle?
to answer. I mean, the screenplay requires him to be mean in that moment, right? Because they
Yeah.
require Pooh and him to part ways. I think this points at a maybe at a bigger issue, which I think we might have thought about getting into later. But just the idea of the Winnie the Pooh characters working better in smaller, lower stakes stories than they do in
Mm,
full length films
that's a good
with a
point.
big story arc. Because most of at least what the Pooh stories that I think work best, like in the original Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, are three shorts
Yeah.
that have like pretty low stakes, and everything is very cordial and very childlike, and raising the stakes into a full length feature. I
Hmm.
think it requires a level of conflict that goes against sort of like the basic personalities of these characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's a really good point. I agree with you. Even in the 2011 film, it's really kind of bunched into little shorts in a way. It's not as much as Many Ventures, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's sort of little subplots that it kind of divides into,
Right.
which I appreciate. And that movie's like, I think, only 65 minutes, and I appreciate that as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I thought that they did a pretty good job with all of the characters. The I thought I liked all the voice acting. I thought it was all good, and it's nice to have Jim Cummings is Pooh is a legend.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought
And
Brad
as
Garrett was a
Tigger,
good Eeyore.
he was really good as Eeyore. And it caught me as a surprise that Jim Cummings was also doing Tigger, because they had announced Chris O'Dowd as Tigger, but apparently he didn't really. Uh, I think it didn't play in the test screenings. People didn't like it, and so they went
Oh,
to Jim Cummings to redub the part.
interesting. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't very much Tigger. Uh, but yeah, I thought they all the voice acting all worked and I thought they captured the
Sure.
characters well.
Yeah, I was surprised because I didn't know this, that some of the characters were toys and some of the characters were actual animals,
Oh
and
yeah, that was kind of
that is from the original books. I didn't know that. I looked it up after the movie because I was wondering about that. But yeah, rabbit and owl are not really toys. They're just an owl and a rabbit that live in the woods.
oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, and this was a problem in the 2011 film, is they kind of make Owl and Rabbit the same, and and I haven't read the books in a long time, but my understanding is that like Owl's the sort of the snobby, Fraser Crane-ish kind of type, and
Yeah, know it all.
yeah, know it all, and where Rabbit is the cranky one, and
Yeah.
and they like are both the cranky ones.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, neither of them gets a lot to do. We spend most of the time with the main four,
Yeah,
characters: Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, and Eeyore.
Yeah, and especially Eeyore and Pooh, I get the
Yeah.
most, which is fine with me.
Yeah.
So overall, I mean, this is just a lot of sort of pratfalls and different things. Like he falls into a pool of water and different things like that. And I did think it was cute, the briefcase of important stuff that that he has, and that Tigger replaces his important papers with drawings and stuff like that. That was cute. And
yeah, I agree with that. I think the parts where we spend time with the animals are the ones that work best.
Yeah.
And the ones that sort of like are very cute and very entertaining, and they're good enough that it make me forgive the things about the script that I wasn't crazy about, the things that don't really work that much, the parts that feel, like we've seen 1,000 times before, because just spending time with these characters is having a good time. And I think they do a really good work with them, especially Pooh. I think they did a really good job with him, and he's so cute and he's so funny, and you can, Pooh's always been one of my favorite characters out of the Winnie the Pooh stories, and I think they do a really great job here.
My only problem was that I just didn't feel a sense of like whimsy. I didn't feel a sense of magic. There were maybe a few moments in the 100-Acre Woods, but it all just felt kind of gloomy to me. And I think it's because they started off with like Christopher's forgotten them, and like the characters are all kind of sad, and there is always a little bit of a sadness to Pooh, because he's a deep thinker and a ponderer and all that. But I don't know, like I missed a sense of whimsy, I think, in this.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know about sense of whimsy, but I definitely agree with the sad element. There is a little bit of like, nostalgia in the Winnie the Pooh stories, and definitely the Disney versions. And I think they lean a little too much into the sad, emotional things in this one.
Yeah.
It really felt like they were trying to, make the grown-ups say cry, or like you'll be emotionally overwhelmed.
Because like Hook has lots of problems, but it does have quite a few scenes of whimsy, and exploring Neverland and playing with the Lost Boys and stuff like that. Like I feel like it's more magical than this.
Yeah. Well, you also run into a problem because the 100-Acre Woods is not, such a adventurous, big, exciting place in the way that Neverland, for example, is.
Yeah, that's fair.
And especially for an adult. So when you have a Christopher Robin as a kid, it makes more sense. But like bringing in this adult person into this world full of little plush toys, it's like a little weird. And like, where do you go from there? They can have a picnic and have a good time, but there's not much else that they can do.
That's why it would have made the most sense for Madeline to have found the 100-Acre Woods. This is the lesson from this story. That's the fundamental flaw of this screenplay, is that she's being sent off to boarding school. So she goes, runs away, hides, finds the 100-Acre Woods, and has this magical experience with Pooh and team. That should have been the story. But nevertheless, yeah. So they end up realizing they need to get these papers to Christopher, and so they go, and they're in London. Madeline is lost, and there's shenanigans throughout London, which I thought were fun.
Yeah, they're okay. I think this is another part in which I wish we had a sturdier hand directing the movie. Some of the editing, there's a lot of driving cars and chases and that sort of thing. I think you could have gotten a little more mileage out of them with a different shot list, let's say.
Yeah, that's fair. And he ends up getting to the meeting, and his the whole family is there with all of the animal creatures, and he announces his plan that they should reduce the price of luggage and give all the employees paid leave so that there's more increased demand for luggage. What did you think of the proposal?
This was a really bizarre way I thought of coming up with a solution. Perhaps a little more honest than some other times, because his solution is at least rooted in capitalism, which is, we know Disney loves capitalism. So it feels a little more honest than just him being like nobody should work, and things that I'm sure nobody who works at Disney would ever say.
Yeah.
But so this plan goes a little bit more in an honest direction. It still feels a little bizarre. I think I would like to see a parody of this sort of movie of the dad who is overwhelmed with work, directed by someone like Boots Riley, who directed Sorry to Bother You. Just because it's such a bizarre thing, and he seems to be such a left-leaning socialist director, that it made me think a lot about that stuff. I wonder what he would have thought of this ending, which is so
he literally turns the trickle-down economics triangle
upside down. Yeah.
We're gonna give everybody paid time off.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's very European when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, listen, seems to work for them, so
there you go. I'm a fan. They can do this. This is great. So that was kind of funny to me. And of course, you have the evil, the true villain, his associate, who's doing all of the work for while the associate goes and plays golf. That's the true villain. He's bad if he plays golf.
Yeah.
It's just like in Hallmark movies, if the character in a Christmas movie is talking on his cell phone in the car in the first 15 minutes, he's no good. No good.
Right. Or like how every bald person in a movie is a villain.
Yeah, right. Because they should be participating in Christmas spirit, not talking on your cell phone. No. All right. So then we get, and then we're not going to send Madeline to boarding school, and everybody's made up, and everybody is happy, and there you go. So, I did think it was fun, the ending with Richard Sherman playing a new song, busy doing nothing.
That was very cute.
That was pretty cool. On the beach. That was I didn't really like this movie, but I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up on one of my highlights of 2018 movies, because I love Richard Sherman. That was cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's very nice, it's funny, and it's cute to see all the characters at the beach with their sunglasses and whatever.
Yeah, that was fun. We basically pretty much covered everything. Do you think that they could have made Haley Atwell's character, his wife, more interesting or better character?
I think every wife character in every movie could be more interesting, because how could they not? So yeah, they could have given her. She has a couple funny moments with Eeyore that I think are pretty cute, but she could have done more.
Right. And the weird gin rummy neighbor. What was the point of that? It was just to show that he was
really
just
strange.
He was just too busy.
Yeah, because it doesn't really pay off in a way. So listen, the screenplay has 3 credited screenwriters, and my hunch is that they did not write together. So I think Alex Frost Perry wrote the first draft, then they brought in probably either Tom McCarthy or Alison Schroeder to write the second, and then the other for the third. So yeah. It's like a movie that wanted to figure itself out.
It reminded me of have you seen Game Night?
Yeah, I have.
Oh,
yeah, great. Of course, the neighbor.
The neighbor in Game Night.
Yeah.
Why is he so find someone else to play gin rummy with, you weirdo?
Well, in Game Night, the neighbor pays off in a huge way. He plays a huge part in the story, but this weird neighbor never comes back.
That's right.
He's not even at the beach, I don't think. I don't know what happened to him.
He's just playing gin rummy by himself.
Probably.
Yeah, it was really odd. Talk about Paddington 2, which I do think that hurt this movie a lot, because I just think that movie was so much more better executed. But the Peter Capaldi character in Paddington is so much better executed in that way.
Right.
It's kind of the nosy, difficult neighbor. But I think that they should just Christopher should just move to the country. They have that whole house there. and then Madeline can play in the 100-Acre Woods, and yeah, that, I mean, I guess he'd be too far away from work, but evil work. But I don't know. It just wasn't. It really bothered me that they changed the promise. I really didn't like that, and I think that they should have had Madeline be the lead and Christopher to find his magic along with his daughter. And I mean, I think Ewan McGregor was pretty good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good job.
Yeah.
But overall, I was disappointed. It just, I didn't think that there was whimsy. I thought some of the messaging was strange. I don't know. I just didn't. It's not the worst, but I was disappointed.
Sure.
I didn't really like it.
Yeah. I thought it was okay. I had a good enough time. I think I really think the animated characters, especially Pooh, did a lot for me to, have a good time, enjoy the movie. I wouldn't call it, a masterpiece or anything like that. I thought it was okay. It would probably be my second favorite of the remakes after Pete's Dragon, if I'm being honest. But I'm not really crazy about any of them except for Pete's Dragon.
Interesting. It would probably be my. I think it would be maybe my fourth. I think I like Jungle Book better. I think I'd say Pete's Dragon, Cinderella, Jungle Book, Christopher Robin. Personally. So because I like what they did with Mowgli's character, and that I thought that was an improvement upon the original, that part of it, at least to me. So yeah, there we go. So there it is, Christopher Robin. Well, next we get Dumbo, so that should be interesting. Or I guess Mary Poppins. So we'll see what happens, but
we'll see.
But at least we got a new Sherman Brothers song, Richard Sherman song, out of all of this. So we can be grateful for that. But thanks for coming talking to me about these remakes and about Christopher Robin.
Absolutely. It's always fun.
I really enjoyed it. So where can people find you?
Right. So the easiest way to get to me is probably on Twitter. I am at Coco Hits New York. And I have a blog, which is cocohitsnewyork.wordpress.com. I'm not writing a lot on that blog these days, but I might. I am, though, writing at least once a month for a very nice website called alternatending.com. So you can look for my writing there, and I will be definitely sharing whenever I write something for them on my Twitter feed.
Cool. Great. I'll have the links for that in the description section, and you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews on iTunes and on YouTube, and all of our social media. Would love to hear your thoughts about this movie. It seems to be pretty divisive. People either seem to really like it or are not into it, so let us know which side you are on and what you think of these various remakes. I'd love to hear, and thanks so much again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and we will talk again soon.